What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about why the British look down on Americans. Is this true? I'm both curious to hear about this, but I got to admit, I'm also a bit nervous. I mean, I'm open to some criticism, but do the British really look down on us Americans? And if so, why exactly? That is exactly what I am hoping to learn about here today. So I'd like to take a look at this video, why the British look down on Americans, and see what I can learn. So let's take a look.
With some, the anti-American sentiment ran very hot.
Oh.
I was reminded of my childhood, when people warned me all the time about Americans. Too loud, too rich, too happy, too confident, too direct, too honest.
Whoa! What an intro. Is this something that British people can relate to? What is this? In your childhood, people warning you about Americans? I know that in British culture, I think you're exposed a lot to American culture. I think British people know a lot more about America than us Americans know about British culture. I think that's safe to say. We Americans we're definitely inside our little bubble here. But some of the things here are kind of stereotypes I think I've heard about Americans. Too loud, we're too rich. Well, that's a nice one. That's a good for us, but some of us, I guess. But like any country, I think there's a distribution of the wealthy and poor, and that definitely exists here in the United States too. But maybe compared to other countries around the world, too happy, is that a bad thing? Maybe, are we annoyingly happy? Or maybe another way of saying it is we're a bit naive, perhaps, is another way you could look at it. Too confident, too direct, too honest. Wow. Okay, let's keep going.
I'm very curious what people are going to have to say about this. I have a feeling I'm onto something, okay? So, having said that, let's start talking to some people.
Oh, God. Okay. Oh, God. So this is an American. He is actually in Britain, and he is going to just interview British people, and I think other Americans as well, and see what everyone has to say on this topic. Oh my God.
I always feel really terrible that everyone's first attitude is, oh, you're from America, are you? Oh, okay.
Really?
Which is always you always feel a bit bad about that, because I'm not entirely sure why we still do that, but
What? Really? Is that true? It's so crazy for me to think about, because I can only think about this from my American perspective. If someone from Britain comes over here to America, we're in awe. We're like, oh my gosh, your accent, your culture. Yeah. Oh man, you're a world traveler. You're from Europe. Oh, we're like, oh my God. It's like magic to us. And to hear that in Britain, it's more like, oh, you're American, huh? Ooh. Is that really the response? I know this is a generalization, but it's still very interesting to hear about.
Yeah.
How do you feel perceived as Americans by the British here in London?
A big, stupid, bellowing oaf. Yeah, genuinely. I always feel like I have to apologize for being American. It's I know my accent's the worst thing you'll hear today, but can I just order a coffee?
My experience, I feel like...
Huh? What? This is kind of shocking to me. I gotta be honest. I think, part of me is aware that Americans have a reputation of traveling. If we travel to other places around the world, we're kind of uneducated about other parts of the world. We don't really bother to learn about other cultures. And our culture has its questionable moments itself here in the United States. I am very willing to admit that. But to be, how did she put this again? A big, stupid, bellowing oaf, I think, is how she phrased it. Dang. Well, that makes me a bit self-conscious, I gotta say.
Like has been a little bit different. I think that might be somewhat informed by the fact that I'm a student here.
Okay.
At first, there was a bit of a learning curve. Like when I would speak loudly on the tube, I would kind of get looks, and people would tell me like, "You're being American. Like, can you maybe not?"
There's definitely
You're being American. I've never heard it phrased like that before. You're being American. Please, quiet down. Have some respect. You're being very American. I get that. Yeah, I get that. Especially if, like, something very obvious like that is going on, where we're being loud on the train or public transportation. It definitely opens my eyes to the fact that here in America, I think we don't have as much respect for other people. We're not really as aware of how we affect others here in America. And that's kind of been normalized a bit, where we just ignore each other if we're loud. And we kind of need to understand when we're going to other places, like Britain, it's a different culture, different customs and societal norms, and that's on us to understand and adapt to. I totally agree with that.
sort of a sense that there is a lot of difficult things going on in America, and that America potentially could be quite a difficult place to live, especially if you're of colour or from the Middle East.
I have to admit,
Fair.
the inspiration to make this video came when I moved to Europe. As I've explored in previous videos on this channel, many Europeans have mixed to negative views of Americans as dumb and uncultured. But too
Dumb and uncultured. I think this is most shocking to me because part of me is like at least a little aware that Europeans and British people included think a certain way about Americans, like have an American stereotype. I just didn't realize it was so negative. Maybe just in this video we're kind of focusing on the negative aspects of that's literally what the video is about, the negative parts, things you can look down upon about Americans. It can't all be this bad, right? Right? Right?
To my surprise, the same goes for the British. I've come to realize that the only people that see the British as intelligent and sophisticated are the Americans. Many Europeans, like the Portuguese or the Spanish, see a very different reality. The British think,
What? I didn't expect the video to go this direction either. Brits, you're getting roped into this now too. You're right here with me. I thought this was just about how people perceive Americans, but this is very fascinating to me as well. Like here in America, we have stereotypes about British people, and they're very positive for the most part. I think that British people are very high class, cultured, sophisticated, sophisticants with very beautiful, like elegant accents that are very posh. And I know that might sound a little weird and goofy, but I really do believe, for the most part, Americans have a really good opinion of British people, like really positive, actually. And when British people visit, we're pretty enamored by them and are like, your accent is so cool. Tell me about fish and chips and tea, please. We're very interested. But maybe that's not how the rest of the world views Britain. I guess all countries view other countries in different ways, I guess. Maybe there's some countries out there that really love Americans and think we're just the coolest. And can we watch a video about that instead? How countries that think America is just the greatest and the coolest? That'd be great. But let's keep going here.
go off on holiday to get extremely drunk and break things. The British that are isolationist with Brexit. The British that don't learn foreign languages, that stick to their native tongue. Wait a second,
That's
I thought
us.
to myself. That's what Americans do.
Yeah.
Other people do this as well?
How dare they copy us?
Of course. Still, it does feel like the Brits act like the Americans of Europe, but I am certain that is not something that they'd like to hear said about them. I mean, no offense. I am American after all. Does that not prove my point, though? No one wants to stoop to the level of Americans.
Whoa. He's saying that being called American or you're like an American. That's like a big insult. Hey, wait a minute. I take some offense to that. What? You're being so American right now. Man, that sounds so bad. Oh no.
I felt I had to get my answers directly from the source. My perception is that the UK is 1 foot in Europe, 1 foot like in the Americas. It feels like it should be in the middle of the Atlantic. Do you agree with that?
I think that's a pretty conclusive idea. Yeah, I think that's definitely true because a lot of people wouldn't even class England as being in Europe. You know, even in England, when you talk about going to Europe, no one ever thinks you mean Doncaster. They always think you mean Germany. You do.
What? This is such an interesting video. So many things here, so many nuances I never have heard or never understood. People say Britain? Hold up. Britain is not like the rest of Europe? Or Britain is a little more similar to America than the rest of Europe? As a matter of fact, this guy is saying that British people sometimes talk about Europe as if that's another place, like Britain isn't a part of Europe. I have never thought about it that way, although I do agree that I consider the UK to be the nation that I can relate to the most in Europe. Of course, that makes complete sense. Because that's just a fact. Speak the same language, we can communicate, we can understand each other, consume each other's media. There are similarities between our culture. Don't take offense to that. I'm calling Britain. I'm saying Britain has some similarities with America. I might be crossing the line there, but certainly compared to the rest of Europe, it does. That makes sense. I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
That annoys people quite a lot. But then again, it's the same way that English people are often perceived as all sort of being from London. The American dream, making yourself better and being seen to be self-improving. And it's a lot about earning money and being the best you can and going to the gym and all these kind of things.
Are you saying it's positive or negative?
I think it's a positive thing for Americans, but I think the way it's perceived is often everyone goes, oh, get out of my face, because no one likes to enjoy someone else's success, at least in England anyway. I think in America it's probably very different. Oh, great, you got to...
Wow, this is really interesting. So there's just aspects of American culture that British people and probably Europeans in general just don't connect to and don't like. Whereas here in America, we really praise people who are grinding and trying to become the biggest and the best and the loudest and the most opinionated. Those people become famous and successful, and we idolize them. And I would agree that those are not all great qualities that we should be praising, for sure. So I would agree with that. Yeah, that's true.
Promotion, fucking bastards,
I think the identity of being American is such a thing,
right?
That I don't think other places have that as much.
I don't think people are necessarily dumb, and I don't think it's a question of being dumb. I think it's just that there's this idea of being the best. To think that people in America, depending on where you're born, you can have access to care or not, it's frightening. And I don't know how you can speak about being the best when you can't even make sure that everybody's taken care of. Are you treating everyone the same way in America? No, not everyone is treated the same way, just like not everyone is treated the same way in Europe.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of that are problems that exist everywhere in the world, where you can be born and you have no control over that, and the circumstances of your life may be out of your control, just based on where you're born, or who you're born to, or what you look like when you're born. All this kind of stuff, which isn't fair, of course. But she made a lot of good points. I think one of the biggest points she's saying is it comes across as annoying that Americans think we are the best. Is that true or not? I definitely think there is a large aspect of that in American culture. Whether Americans are willing to admit it or not, we definitely have that air, that gravitas about us, that we do think our country is one of the best, if not the best. And maybe it's because we have stuff that gets covered in news and like a big economy, and we have Hollywood and actors and like famous people, and just a lot of it. We consider a lot of important stuff to be here in America, and whether that's true or not, you need to have some kind of humbleness behind that. Some kind of like, you have to be able to handle that responsibility, and also have the awareness to be like, we're no better than any other people in this world. We're no better. We may be different. So I can absolutely see that. There's definitely some truth to that. It's hard for me to admit, I think. But if I was outside of America, looking at America, and I felt any kind of like pompous, like, oh, we're the best kind of attitude, I would be extremely annoyed. So I would understand why British people, and maybe probably people around the world, look down on Americans if we present that attitude of like, we are the best, we are the most important, we decide everything. That would be like, for one thing, that's not true, and it's annoying that you think that. So if that's the case, if I'm hearing this correctly, that makes sense to me. I see now.
Having been to America a lot, they often ask, obviously as a joke, but just like, do you know the royal family or anything?
So do you feel that generally, this big generalization, there's mockery towards the Americans, and Americans towards the British is more like cute. We think you're cute.
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Americans thinking you're cute?
Well, it can be taken as a compliment, obviously, but if they think that we're, like, as a country, not really a force to be reckoned with, then just because we do all these, like, things that date back to long before the US was established, it's not really relevant that they can mock us for that.
Is it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally get this as well. If Americans give off that attitude of like, oh, your culture is so cute. You have the royal family and like a king. Oh, how quaint. That's not like fun to hear. That's just like annoying. Like, yeah, that is our culture. Yep. And it does come off as like an attitude of Americans being like, oh, that's so funny. You go off and do that, and we'll be here doing important things. Like, that would be so freaking annoying. I'm starting to understand. I'm really starting to get it. It's nice to hear this from British people, some of these insights, and I mean, they're being presented pretty respectfully. I got to admire that as well. Even though these are criticisms, they're valid and kind of eye-opening.
Condescending, would you say?
A little bit.
Or ignorant?
More ignorant. It doesn't, like, hurt me.
Yeah.
How do you feel Americans perceive the British, first of all?
They kind of look down on us.
You feel that?
I feel like Americans think like they're on top of everything. And
yeah, I can't help but stop it again and just try to... I can't speak for all Americans, obviously, but I don't feel like we look down on Britain. But maybe indirectly, if we think we're just the most important, the greatest thing ever, that is indirectly, that's looking down on everyone else, and not even considering them as part of that conversation. So whether we realize it or not, we're being disrespectful whenever we present that sort of attitude. Yeah.
there's always competition between the two.
So do you feel like the British have a chip on their shoulder a little bit because of that?
Yeah, a lot.
What do you think the British are better at than Americans?
Being polite, really.
More polite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
More talkative, more helpful.
More helpful. The British are more helpful.
Yeah, than Americans. But Americans are nice. They're funny. Got good music.
Okay.
Got good music. Okay. Oh, the British have good music too, man.
Americans are taking over the music scene.
But I mean, come on. There's a lot of great British music. So here's the thing that I think is going on here.
True.
We are not the same, the Brits and the Americans, but we sure have a lot of similarities. Compare us to the Japanese or to Native Americans or to Ethiopians, and the differences between Americans and the British seems relatively small.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Well, it's funny because a lot of the stuff I learn about on this channel about British culture just spells out to me how freaking different America is to Britain. We are so freaking different. But compared to other countries in other parts of the world, like Asia or something, there's a lot of similarities too. That's true.
We're like blood siblings in the village that is the globe. So here's what all of this started to make me think of. There's a concept in psychoanalysis. I'm going to read you the definition, but it's called the narcissism of small differences. This comes from Freud. The narcissism of small differences is the idea that the more a relationship or community shares commonalities, the more likely the people in it are to engage in interpersonal feuds and mutual ridicule because of hypersensitivity to minor differences perceived in each other. We see this all over the world.
Interesting. So the fact that Britain and America are sort of similar creates more tension between us. I don't feel any tension with Britain. I gotta be honest. I don't think a lot of Americans feel tension with Britain. I hope a Britain doesn't feel tension with America. I mean, there's a bit of tension going on in this video, but it's mostly just Brits explaining this attitude that Americans have that I don't think we're really aware of, which is, so it's actually kind of good that I'm watching this and learning about this. But anyway, that's interesting. Like, because we have similarities, we're more in, like, contest with each other. Like, we're comparing ourselves, I think, because we are kind of similar. We compare ourselves, and it's like we're in a competition with each other or something. This is some kind of like phenomenon that exists in psychology or whatever. Okay, that's interesting.
The Argentinians and the Chileans, for example, between the French and the Belgians. And indeed, I think this is what is happening between the Brits and the Americans. But at the end of the day, I feel like we make the little things that make us different much bigger than they really are.
The way that we speak and the words that we use.
Yeah.
And again, we were talking about this, weren't we?
Yeah.
About
we were
certain
talking
words.
about things like autumn versus fall. And it's like that's often something that people like bring up. And for some, well, it's because it's a simpler word. And it's like, fall, American.
You guys don't say fall.
Do British all say fall? Or autumn? British say autumn. Americans say fall, mostly. Sometimes autumn, when we're feeling fancy.
Oh, we don't say fall. We say
interesting.
Autumn.
Okay.
So this is autumn. Not fall.
But you can say autumn as well.
Okay, and I think with that, I'm gonna stop it here for now. We've been going at this for quite a while now. This is a long video, but I am really enjoying the topic here. I thought this was gonna be kind of like disheartening, and kind of, I was a bit nervous to hear about all this, but it's actually pretty fascinating, and the more I think about this, the more it kind of opens my brain up that this is a good thing for Americans to learn about and hear about, like, as painful as it is to hear about what other cultures think about us and how we're perceived. It's probably a good thing. I've survived this long, so if you've survived this long as well and you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on why British look down on us Americans, or if you agree with that or not. That'd be very interesting to hear about. And if you're interested in part 2 of this, where I'll finish the rest of this video, feel free to subscribe for more. Or if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Britain and British culture and stuff about Britain I've never learned before, feel free to subscribe for that as well. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.